Hello, my name is Tim Bradrick, and this is my code discussion for my capstone project, Milestone 10. What I first showed in my video was the loading screen. What I did to create that is there is a object that I put on there with an animation, and basically, if you look over here, that object is 1,000 units away from the main screen. And if we zoom out, we should be able to see the main screen. There's the main screen, and we'll just zoom in on that. And it's just out of the way. And what I did is wherever I am loading one of the scenes that takes a little bit of time, I do a call inside of the loading message functions class on the load scene async, and that's this right here. So I give a call to this method. Basically what it does is it takes that the picture of the loading scene with the animation on it, and it takes it and moves it to the location where the camera is, and then Unity allows you to asynchronously load a level, and that's what it does. And then when it at this point it pauses and waits for that that level to be finished, and then when it's finished, it moves the that picture back out of the way, 1,000 units away, and that's basically what's going on in those two situations here. And I actually used this start coroutine in several different locations throughout my game, and then it all refers to this. All right, next, one of the features you saw is when the squirrel gets to 0 health, it basically flips over on its back, and then it starts to fade to black. The main feature that I have is in the squirrel controller. The squirrel controller in the update section keeps track of the squirrel's current health, and if the squirrel's current health ever falls below 0 or reaches 0, it sets the animation as defeated, and that's the picture of the squirrel on its back. And then it starts another coroutine, and it waits 1.5 seconds, and then it shows the full screen 1.5 seconds, and then it starts to fade. And then over here is the fading class, the fade screen class. Basically, I have a black rectangle, and I take that black rectangle and stretch it over the entire screen. And when that rectangle is first awakened, it's also turned off and set to clear, so that it doesn't take up extra processing power to calculate the intersections of the touches and so forth. Now, when the squirrel controller detects that the squirrel's at 0 health, it calls the fade screen to black. So it takes that black rectangle and does a color interpretation, or between the original color, and which is clear, and then black, and then it slowly fades it over a span of time. And once that black screen is 95% black, it loads the next level. And this level right here is the squirrel's home. Okay, so basically it just slowly fades it into a full black screen, and then it automatically goes to the next scene, which is the squirrel's home. And then in the squirrel's home, I've added some additional features here regarding the squirrel's health. When you first open up the squirrel's home, it checks to see what its health is. If its health is at 0 or below, it increases it to 1 automatically. And then there's a timer that starts up, and we could quickly show that over here. It's the fake scroll that's in there is not damaged, so it's not showing, but there's a timer right there and a timer object. Let's see if we can get that showing here. Right there's the health timer, and basically what the script does is it starts at 10 seconds and easily adjustable, and it starts counting down. And once it reaches 0, right here, it adds 1 to the squirrel's health up to a maximum of its regular maximum value. So we can move that over. There we go. And then it resets the timer in case there's more than 1 health point that is missing. And then it starts the timer over and counts down again and again and again up until it's up to maximum. Okay, and then here it just turns on and off that timer like it is now. When I demonstrated the scene, it is turned off. So enabled equals false is where it's off, and that's the situation that it's sitting at when I demonstrated that. All right, so next I have the electrical hazards, and the electrical hazards would be only one in existence now. It's that the insulator on the telephone pole right there. Let's see here. There is there are some colliders here. One is a detection collider, a trigger, and one is a physics collider, which is that triangular shaped thing. When the squirrel is running along, it does not enter the triangle, but it can enter the circle. And if it does enter the circle, it triggers an effect. And that effect here is that the squirrel's health, current health value, is decremented by 1. And then second, it checks to see the position of the squirrel, whether it's to the left or to the right of the electrical insulator picture, and then it adds a force onto the squirrel as an impulse, not as a steady continuous force, but all of a sudden. So it pushes the squirrel back with some force. And what it does is it throws the squirrel 30 units in the opposite direction and 15 units into the air. So there's kind of an arc to it. And that's what that does. And the throw direction is just a comparison of whether it's on the left or the right. And it just multiplies the force, whether it's a positive 30 or negative 30. So it determines the direction. All right, next is let's go to the falling hazards. A little bit less complicated than the birds. Let's see here. The falling hazard, the only one in existence is this bush right here. When the squirrel is running along the telephone crossbar here, the intention is for it to jump onto the roof, but it might miss the jump and fall down here, or it might be tempted to get the goodies over here and try to go back, and so forth. And what's going on here is that the bush has a collider, and attached to that collider is this script here. And that script is shown right here. Basically, when the squirrel enters the collider, the bounce back activity is activated, and here is the activity up here, which I'll talk about in a moment. And the squirrel is set as kinematic. It doesn't respond to the physics engine in the Unity development environment. So basically, it will just go through the objects and so forth and get to where I want it to be. When the bounce back activity is activated, what's happening here is the position of the squirrel is interpolated over time from its beginning position, whatever that may be, to the target destination, which I've set above the telephone pole. And let's see if we can get the target destination. There's the target. So when the squirrel falls down here and gets there, it goes up to this point, which is over the lower crossbar, and then it'll fall back down. And because it's not interacting with the physics, it'll just travel right through the crossbar. And because the point is over the crossbar itself, it will recover at that point. And that's what this is doing. Now, I need to make sure that the bounce back condition is turned off, and that's what this down here, it checks to see if the squirrel is at that point up here in the sky. And if it is, it stops moving the squirrel artificially through this instruction here, and it turns the physics back on the squirrel. So it will fall back down and hopefully continue on its way from there. All right, and of course there is the reduction in health when he falls. All right, the birds. Now, let's see here. Let's get to their section. Okay, I have the birds here, and I have 3 of them on the line. And let's just zoom in on one of them. The birds there are 2 colliders. The circle is the physics collider. The squirrel cannot pass over through that, and if it touches that, it will lose health. And then the second collider is that big rectangle. That rectangle starts the bird doing its animations. So, and then on each bird is the script right here, the NPC effects, little blue bird. And this is that script. All right, when the birds first start, it starts a random starting point for the animation. That's wait to shift. And then it checks to see if it's flying away. If it's not, it just sits there and waits for something to happen. And that's the squirrel running into it. And let's see here. If it runs into it, it loses health. It starts setting the animations to flying, and then it flies up into the air towards a target point. And it drops, if the squirrel ran into it while it was in the air, it drops an acorn, and that's what this does. And then the acorn itself, it is first interacting with the physics, then it's turned on. Okay, as I was saying before, when it drops an acorn, it first interacts with the physics of the world, and that's what this item here is. It has a rigid body and a collider and so forth. However, one of the things that I was noticing is I was having problems with the squirrel collecting the value of the acorn, um, and the timing with generating it. I was trying to destroy the acorn after the squirrel collected it, but I kept getting error messages, and it seemed like that in the middle of creating it, it was also destroying it within nanoseconds of each other, and I was just getting error messages that the object has already been destroyed and so forth. So what I did is I used one of the features of Unity. Using this collider here, this is set up initially as a physics collider, but then transfer it to a trigger collider. And you notice that the method to collect the acorn value from the acorn is a trigger type of method instead of a collision. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm changing how the acorn is set up. I'm using the exact same collider, but I change it into a trigger instead of a physics collider after waiting about a second and a half. That way I'm avoiding the error messages. When the acorn is first generated, it drops to the falls due to gravity, or the bird or the squirrel could bump it around and have it fly off into different directions and so forth. But after a second and a half, it just hangs at the point where it stops. Hopefully that's at the low point on that wire. But it could be an amusing situation otherwise. And then it's turned into a trigger, and then the player can come over and collect the value from the acorn. That was one of the more challenging things that I had to figure out for it this week. And then finally, generating a random squirrel. Basically, I took my default squirrel method and applied random numbers here, and a whole bunch of different random names, which I will be revealing once I get the I button developed. These are just a bunch of random names that I found from famous fictional squirrels in various settings, and those will just be there. So we see Rocky and so forth, and then just picking random clothing and random stats for the squirrel with a minimum of 3 health. The minimum health that a random squirrel can have is 3, and then the other ones are chosen randomly. Thanks.